Hi, welcome to my channel, Talie's Art. Today's video is about mediums. There are tons of mediums out there on the market. There are so many to choose from, it can be difficult. And once you have gotten a medium, it can be confusing figuring out what to do with it. So I'll be going over the basics about mediums. What is a medium? What are the different types of mediums? Why use one? And how to use one. Before I really go into mediums, I wanted to show you a painting. It's a very old painting of two monks. It's a great example of what can go wrong. As you can see, the painting really has not aged well. It's full of cracks, huge cracks. If you don't use mediums the right way, this can happen. You need to use the right amount of medium, and you need to use the fat over lean rule. If you use a medium without really understanding what it's doing to the paint, it's like crossing your fingers, closing your eyes, and hoping things will work out. You might still be getting some fantastic results once in a while, but what you really want to get is the very best result on a regular basis. So, as I was saying, there are tons of mediums. But what is a medium? Well, it's simply something that you mix into the paint. It's a liquid that changes the oil paint's properties. Here's a simple question. What's in this tube? No, it's not a trick question. Have you ever asked yourself, what is oil paint? Well, it's simply a paste made of pigment and oil. The oil holds or carries the pigment. And have you asked yourself, why even bother with mediums? Why not use the paint straight out of the tube? Well, the answer to that is yes. You can use paint straight out of the tube. But do you really want to do that? Sometimes you might. But most of the times the paint is too thick to spread, or you might use a lot of paint tubes just for a few paintings. You might want to speed up the drying time or slow down the drying time. Sometimes you might want a dull effect. More likely you want a shiny glossy effect. So how do you get these different effects? Well, you use a medium. A medium will change a paint's properties. A medium will change a paint's texture, transparency, or drying time. I don't want an overload of info, so to simplify things, I will say there are two main ingredients in mediums. There are oils and there are solvents. It's good to remember that oil is the main ingredient in oil painting, and there are different types of oils you can use. You can use oils like walnut oil, safflower, poppy oil, or lavender oil. Each one has different properties. But again, to keep this simple, I will stick to linseed oil, which is the most popular one. Linseed oil is best if you get the artist quality. It'll have the least amount of impurities, otherwise it could dry a yellowish color. The other type of basic mediums are solvents. Now, this can be argued because solvents are volatile, but again, let's keep it simple. Turpentine has to be the refined or rectified turpentine. Really, do not go into a hardware store and buy the cheap version. It'll have a terrible smell. It won't have the same properties as the artist's turpentine. It can damage your paintings and it can damage your health. It's interesting to know turpentine is a resin made from pine trees and was used a lot by many of the old master painters. It's kind of like a classic. Some useful info is that turpentine will dry at a faster rate than mineral spirits or white spirit. Other useful info is that oil paint doesn't actually dry, it hardens through a process of polymerization. The other solvent is mineral spirit or white spirit. This solvent can be very confusing. You have bottles with different names like white spirit, mineral spirit, petroleum spirit, turpentine substitute, paint thinners. Most of these are derived from petroleum, and white spirit is often used for cleaning your paintbrushes and tools. But you can use a mineral or petroleum based solvent to mix with your oil paint if you use an artist's odorless mineral spirit. Again, as with turpentine, you want the refined artist quality. Please do not go buy the cheap hardware version. Remember that all solvents are volatile. This means they quickly evaporate into the air and can get into your lungs. Use them sparingly and in a place where you have a lot of fresh air. My tip is instead of an open cup, I use a jar and close the lid as often as possible. Or I use an eyedropper. Let's make our first medium. Take an empty bottle, pour some clarified linseed oil, and write oil. That's it. You've got your first medium. So, why bother making your own mediums? You can go to the store and buy some ready made mediums. But if you make your own at first, you'll understand what's going on with your paint. You'll get the hang of things and you'll be in control. Then, by all means, try out some of those ready made ones. Now that we have our first medium, let's mix our super simple, super basic medium into the paint. I like to use an eyedropper, a glass eyedropper bottle. It makes it easy to drop just the right amount of liquid into the paint. 1 or 2 drops of oil and mix it. What happens as you mix the oil into the paint? You can see it becomes creamier and easier to use. Don't put in too much oil because you would dilute the pigments and overly change the properties of the paint itself. This is a fat mix of paints. You can see it's rather shiny. Info to remember is that it'll take long to dry and it'll have a glossy shine. Now, let's use the other type of super simple medium. Let's use a solvent. Take another bottle, write the name of the solvent you choose to work with. In this case, I'll be working with turpentine, of course, rectified turpentine. And let's make our skinny mix or lean paint. This is used when you paint in layers. You might have heard the term alla prima. That's when you paint in one layer. We'll see that in a different video. Today it'll be about painting in layers, fat over lean. Remember this very important info, fat over lean. Here we have paint mixed with a few drops of solvent, and it's our lean paint. This is used to make our first layer. It's especially useful to sketch directly on the canvas. It'll dry relatively fast, and you can paint over it, no problem. Now, how do I use the lean paint? Well, it will dry relatively fast. I use it to make my first sketch. It'll be the first layer on the canvas. I'm using for this first part of the painting pure solvent and dipping it in my paintbrush, and now I'm just starting to sketch. As you can see, I've already made a little pencil sketch underneath, And this is just to place the different proportions, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's a great layout. And like I said, the whole point of this is that when it dries, I can put layers on top and there won't be any drying problems. Um, this is the lean, and therefore I can put the fat layer over it. The next layers will be mixed with different proportions of solvent and oil. Before buying the ready-made mediums, here are two groups of mediums I recommend. This is the first group. You measure the thirds on a bottle. Then you start by pouring a third of the oil and then 2/3 of the solvent. Here's an easy way of getting your proportions laid out. Then you go to your marked bottles, start with a third oil, 2/3 solvent, and then half oil, half solvent, and then 2/3 oil and a third solvent. The second group of medium, that's the other group, and it's even more simple. First bottle is pure solvent, then you go to half and half, and then I have my bottle of pure oil. Here are all these lovely little bottles with name tags. Let's look at how do I use this stuff. I'll use my second group of mediums to explain it. The one with the solvents, the half and half, and the oil. Now, this was used to make the first layer, the lean layer. When we painted, we made our sketch with this blue color, and it dried quickly. Then we go on to use the half and half. I'm putting in a few drops of this medium into the red, yellow ochre, white, and burnt umber. There's some oil, and it'll make a fatter layer. I'm mixing it up, blending in the medium. Then I'll take some yellow ochre, some red, and some white, and I'll mix these and get some skin tones. Now, normally the first layer has dried and I can paint over it. I'll also paint a little bit of the hat with a dark color. This is paint mixed with some oil, so it's a little fatter and goes over the lean. Next, I'm going to use the oil to make the fat and last layers. Putting in a little bit of oil, mixing it up. This paint will have more texture and gloss. Normally, we need to wait for the previous layer to dry before painting over it. Now, this normally has dried, and I would be able to paint over it. So this is the first and lean layer. The half and half goes over it, and then you paint with the most oil-based layer. Here's my palette of colors. The lean layer is dry enough to paint over it. I'm putting in some dark tones, adjusting areas and shapes, a little bit of skin tones. In oil paint, you work from dark to light. The key to this stage of your painting is not to be scared of dabbing into solvent and dabbing into oil. You'll quickly get the feel of what's right for you. You'll discover the fun in oil painting. After having painted different areas, let them dry. It might take a few days, but one good thing about that, the next day you'll be looking at your painting with new eyes. You'll have a refreshed view of what you did right and hopefully learn from anything that might have gone wrong. Thanks for watching Talie's art. If you liked it, please click on the like button and subscribe.